All right, welcome everybody, and thank you for tuning in today. You are listening to WRUU-LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. This is the Adam Messer Show, and I am your host, Adam Messer. And we have the honor today to have Mr. P.T. Bridgeport in the studio with us.
That's where I am. If you're expecting anything elaborate, I'm the one in the black chair, not the white chair. So anything great is Adam's province.
I don't know about that, but what a coincidence. It's such a wonderful way things worked out today. So, PT, you have a new book out called The Moon and I Confer.
Yes, I do.
Okay, and it is published by our good friend Lee Rich's Montessori.
Monteciciri.
Okay, thank you. I knew I was going to mess that up, but she is a professor at Armstrong or Georgia Southern now, and she also has her own small printing company.
She does, and she co-hosts on the radio with some dude by the name of P.T. Bridgeport twice a week.
I was going to say, y'all have that Listening to Literature show,
We have
right?
Listening to Literature, and she joins me on Beyond the Liner Notes before Listening to Literature.
Nice. So I want to actually, we've already got some of our longtime listeners saying, hey, Darlene and Terry Dremel, they say, we love your co-host.
Oh,
so
I'm presuming they mean Lee, and I do too. You're not bad either, Adam, but I'm not considered a co-host either.
Well,
here.
Today you're a guest.
All
but,
right.
You know, the cool thing is Darlene and Terry Dremel, they're awesome, and I love them to death. They're just wonderful people. So let me just read for the folks at home playing along about this book, The Moon and I Confer. And it says here, P.T. Bridgeport photographs things. He researches things too. Sometimes he thinks about things. This book contains all of that in one proportion or another. In 2017, Bridgeport joined Savannah's community radio station, WRUU.107.5 FM, as the host of the program When the Moon Sings. He plays evocative music that requires quiet listening. He also interviews artists and musicians and offers colorful commentary on life, learning, and all matters of things in the hostess city of the South and beyond. Full of wit and humor, the insights about the inanity of life and the human condition, The Moon and I Confer is a collection of Bridgeport's weekly soapboxes that, like his show, provide a pause in the modern world.
I did not write that. I may secretly agree with it, but I didn't write that.
I was going to say, this sounds very familiar. Like my path is very similar with that. Like I talk, with the show and all, I talk with authors and artists and entertainers,
right,
creative people, and I love actually the human condition is like that's my favorite part about storytelling.
Well, my storytelling is pretty much confined to my life, so that's what I talk about. And one of the neat things for me is that I've been here, I think, 11 years now.
Okay.
So I know the city, but I'm not really of the city.
Right.
And so I write about things that I find interesting or amusing or beautiful or things like that. And sometimes I'm able to tie things that happen here to bigger overall concepts, and that's kind of fun too.
Where are you from originally?
Depends on when you get to originally. I was born in New York City.
Okay.
Lived in northern Connecticut for a while and spent a number of decades, we won't discuss how many, in northern Virginia, fairly close to D.C.
Okay.
And came here from there.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I'm a transplant as well. I moved in 96 from Cincinnati, Ohio. I grew up in Cincinnati. I moved down here when I was like 19. And so, yeah, I know what you mean. It's so funny because I've lived here long enough that people who are not from here, they think I'm from Savannah. but the folks that are from Savannah will ask, "Hey, where are you from?"
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's still that relic of the old South where you're not really a resident unless your grandfather was born here, and some people still play by those rules. Not many, but some.
Yeah, it's and you know what's funny is I think most people are really welcoming.
Oh, they're tremendous. Don't think for a minute they're having grown up in New York City. No, this is not rude. Nobody here is rude.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I do want to throw this out there. I know Savannah. We love visitors from all over the place and all.
Absolutely.
I've seen a bunch of visitors today, tourists or whatever you want to call it. I do want to remind people, if you just happen to be listening to the station right now, Georgia has a law against using your cell phone while you're operating the vehicle. And I saw somebody earlier driving, and they pulled their phone out of the driver's window and took a picture. And like, I know somebody who got a $750 fine for texting and driving.
Yeah.
And, so just a fair warning, safety first. I mean, I get it. If you want to take pictures, I understand that. But, park somewhere. Stop and go take a picture and do it safely. Don't put yourself and your family or other people in danger. So just a friendly little. That's just something that I wanted to say today because I just saw it happen like right before we came into the studio, and I was like,
and if you were driving the delivery van that held me up for 5 minutes while I stayed in the middle of the street, that goes for you too.
Yeah, don't obstruct traffic. So, yeah, I always think I love anecdotal stories though. Like as a kid growing up, we like, it used to be where kids could be seen but not heard, and growing up, I was one of the kids that I like to listen to the stories like from my grandparents, my great grandparents, and my aunts and uncles, and they used to all sit around the table and have coffee or
sure,
whatever, and they would tell these different stories about things that happened in their life and different relatives and all. And like I remember one time my dad's uncle, so I guess he would have been my great uncle, he was talking about his dad when he was a boy. So his name was Crit, and they used to pick apples, by hand, and they'd put them in bushels and stuff like that. And he and this is just a strange story, but it always stuck with me. But Crit was a really strong young boy, and he was able to pick up 2 bushels of apples over both hands, like carrying them in his arms, or one in each arm. And they dared him to be that he couldn't pick it up and carry it and step in a basket and then out of a basket while holding these bushels of apples or whatever. And I think they said he was like 10 or 11, something like that. And he was able to do that at 10 or 11 years old.
Wow.
And I was like, that's kind of crazy, to think about. But people were different. Not that people were different, but I think living conditions were a lot different, and people, kids had to start working at a lot younger age.
Oh, absolutely.
And I remember them talking about like he was born in 1910, and my grandma Brewer was born in 1911, and her name was Irene. And so I just remember those stories, growing up, like different, stories like that. And then of course, today we live in such a connected world. I think the disconnect is that people they communicate, but they don't have conversations, right? As much or as often.
There are a couple things there, Adam. I think you're right. First thing is that there are a lot of people, and there are so many people and so much communication that people tend to back away from it, whereas people back in that era never would. Mm-hmm. And the second thing is that a lot of the communication today is, what would you call it, transactional.
Right.
It's not a friendship. It's, give me a bagel or sell me a picture or,
Or, hey, look at me, I'm doing this thing.
Yeah.
Social media.
Yeah. pictures of my food and my cat and so forth.
Well, I mean, like even before the show, I was like, "Hey, let me get a picture of you with your book," you know.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a memento. You know, it's like I've got a picture. I'm going to be able to put it out when I put the podcast up. That way, people have a reference point. You know, but I know some folks that when they do a picture, it's like they would rather look through the lens of the camera on their phone than actually watch the event. Or
there are people like that. Honestly, I'm not sure that the way we do things now is worse, but I do think it's different.
Yeah.
It's like so much. It's all on how you handle it.
Right. Well, I was wondering because, like, you know, when I was, and I have not read PD's book. I knew, like we were talking about right before we started, I knew that you were working on a book and that you were writing a book. I didn't realize that you had published the book.
Well, that's because probably the last time we talked, I was
like
working on working on an entirely different book, which I still haven't finished.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I think the last time I saw you physically was like about a year and a half ago. I mean, like, well, it's been a while.
Let me talk about this book for a second. It's basically essays, and the essays are taken from basically in 1,000-word essay I do every week on Saturday on the radio. So this
is it a 5-paragraph essay? Like based on the 5 paragraph
1,000 word.
Okay.
1,000 words.
Yeah.
And so we came up with this idea of publishing all of these essays, and that sounded pretty good. Didn't sound like too much work.
Mm-hmm.
And I started going through it, and I realized that when I write for the radio, I'm writing conversational stuff.
Right.
And it doesn't go over that well when you sit down with a book and read it. Mm-hmm. So I'd have to clean up quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And so the editing of the book took pretty close to a year.
Oh, wow.
And then there's the whole thing about, well, maybe I should replace this essay with that essay. And the book has a number of pictures in it. Those are my pictures, too. When I first came here, I fancied myself a photographer. I still do secretly. But some of the pictures that I thought might enhance the text go through. Mm-hmm. And so basically putting it together from a pile of spoken essays was a little bigger job than I thought it might be.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw something one time talking about that I think there's, and I'm probably off on this, but I'm just using round numbers, but there's, I don't know how many thousands of words are in the English language, and then of those that we typically maybe speak 800 to 1,000 words a day, we write between 8,000 to 10,000 words, on average. Now then, you have higher level curriculum or business or scientific stuff that might use different words that are not they're just for that industry or whatever. But that we don't the stuff that we say in conversation is going to be different than what you would write, and vice versa.
Absolutely.
You don't want to use like I call it corporatese type language in real life.
Well, I think written language is a little more formal. Mm-hmm. Since you're communicating with somebody through a page, you have to be a little more careful to define what you mean. Mm-hmm. Face-to-face communication is much more efficient than
because you have verbal cues, you have body language, absolutely. You have facial expressions.
Yep.
That kind of goes back to what we were talking about with context. I feel like with when you said about transactional, because I love that you said that, because I talk about building relationships and having relationships with people, mm-hmm. because we're sold to on a daily basis, 24/7. We're constantly being sold, on advertisements and marketing and that kind of thing. And I feel like that has translated into how people communicate. They're so used to that transactional communication that when they're talking with people back and forth, they don't necessarily focus on the person.
They don't. It takes a while.
Yeah.
And of course, people are either actively or subliminally perfectly aware that all of the selling is being done in a way to make you feel like you're their friend. So they're a little suspicious about it, which is part of the reason it takes the time.
Well, yeah, I mean that's. I feel like that's a kind of going back to the storytelling stuff, right?
Right.
For thousands of years, people that's just, oral communication, storytelling is the way that things were done. You know, I mean, it's only been like the last 500 years or so that we have books,
Right.
you know, available to the masses, and even the last 100 years or so, I would say that it's really been available. And then we have ebooks and those things. So the language has changed, the way people communicate's changed, and I know it sounds crazy, but I feel like when I was a kid, my dad used to say, you know, like that KISS, keep it simple, stupid, and people are so avoidant of saying stupid nowadays, but not in the bad sense of like, you know, you're trying to name call or something like that, just to keep it as simple and basic as you can. You know, and not try to act like you're fluffing it up.
Yeah, especially if you're doing something short. You want to. I don't know about writing short is difficult.
Yeah.
Now I've looked at some of your stuff. You write short. That takes more time and effort than just.
I appreciate. I didn't even know that you read any of my stuff. That's so cool.
Oh yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, so there's that, but. If you're going to write an entire book, unless it's a book of 1,000-word essays, of course, you have to think a little bit more about everything you do, explain a little bit more about everything you do, because if you've got a plot going, what's in your head doesn't necessarily get on paper.
Yeah. Everybody, you're tuning in today to WRU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul, and this is the Adam Messer Show. I'm your host, Adam Messer, here today with my special guest, P.T. Bridgeport, who has his new book, The Moon and I Confer.
Yes, and in context, Adam is the soul and I am the global. So
there we go. I like that. I like that. So, PT, with the essays, and you're just talking about writing and communicating, and it's just making me think it is different conversational style when you're writing it from like that perspective, like when you're on the radio.
Absolutely.
Right. Because people understand, like, I feel like with audiobooks, when someone's reading, like if you were to read, like we're going to have you do a reading a little bit later on. When someone understands that they're reading from a book, they understand and their brain listens to it as if they're reading, right? Whereas when you're talking with someone person to person, and if I were to talk with you the same way, like I'm trying to communicate with you the way that I would write something to you, there's a disconnect, right? It just is. It's just like you said, it's like somebody's trying to sell you on something, or you know, like you have that suspicion or that kind of like that caution. And I just wonder, like, because we don't tell stories the same way anymore. Like, it's almost like I feel like we've been so marketed to and so sold.
I think we can tell stories the same. I can tell you stories about the early days of computers that might sound like my grandfather's stories about being a seaman.
Yeah.
There's that, but sometimes hearing that voice makes it a huge difference. I once heard Robert Frost reading his own poems.
Oh, really?
It was some sort of broadcast he did, and listening to him and his inflection and the way he did things kind of gives you a whole different insight into some of those poems.
Oh, nice.
So Yeah, it's the spoken voice is an enhancement to just sitting there reading a book.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as storytelling, yeah, a lot of us do it different now, but I think there's a place for the old time storytelling.
I do too. Like that's one of the reasons why I like the conversation style interviews instead of doing like question and answer.
Yeah.
I like when I'm writing. When you're talking about the writing, I like brevity. I like concise brevity, and I try to focus, like especially with the articles, I try to focus on the person. You know, I mean, like the book and the events; those are all particulars or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, there's only one PT Bridgeport. You know what I mean?
Thank heavens. No.
But you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
like, you know, the books are going to come and go. The material things are going to come and go. But, you know, you as a person, to me, are going to be, like, your story is going to be more interesting to me than the things that you've got or doing or whatever. You know what I mean?
Well, let me throw that back at you, Adam. Now,
Yes, please do.
Most of the reading I've done of your stuff is basically through your articles. But you also have something of a reputation as a, what would you call it, science fiction, horror?
Yeah.
And I would think that that very, not brief, but precise, to the point, allows people to involve their imagination more when you're doing supernatural types of things, and that would be very effective there. Is that fair statement?
That is exactly, PT, how I like to write my fiction stuff. Because, for example, when you're talking about using your imagination,
Right.
if I'm talking about a character's actions and talking about like the things that they're doing and their dialogue and, you know, the way that they interact with other people, I don't ever have to describe what the person looks like.
Right.
Because your mind and your imagination is going to do that.
Right.
You know, now if I'm talking about a real person, like obviously with nonfiction, I'd want to give a descriptor. You know, I'd want to give those kind of descriptors or whatever. Say, hey, you know, he was tall, you know, wore like a pleated suit and a hat, and, you know, he's clean shaven, that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
He's not describing anybody in the studio right now. I can promise you that, people.
I was just thinking about my grandpa back in the day. But you would want to give like that because that gives you a point of reference and it's accurate and truthful, right?
Okay.
For fiction, to me though, I mean, like, and there's some people, high fantasy, that sometimes those readers want more. They want to know, like, you know, the gilded edges of the tablet. And you know,
They do, because that sets the scene for them.
Right.
But if those details aren't necessary to the plot or to the environment, it's just as well to leave them out, because
distraction.
people pick that up and they wonder where you're going with. And if you don't go anywhere, they're disappointed.
I can't remember the rule, but it was something about if there's a gun in Act 1, it has to be fired in Act 3.
Something like that, yeah.
So I kind of believe in that. It's like, don't introduce something if it's not going to be relevant to the story.
Right.
You know, and you know, that to me is a good story. You know, like when you're talking about, like with a 1,000-word essay, I mean, that's a tight fit. You know, especially when you're talking about different things. I mean, I haven't read any of your essays yet, but it's the same kind of thing. I mean, 1,000 words, excuse me, it's both a lot of time to kind of share with your thoughts with somebody, and it's also like not a lot of time. You know, if you have somebody's captive attention for 10 or 15 minutes, that's a lot of time in today's world. But if it doesn't resonate with them and there's no meaning for them at the end of it, then it means nothing.
Right.
You know, and I feel like that's when you're talking about the supplemental or extra fluff or whatever for stories, or they add something that doesn't really make sense or is not part of it. It's kind of like, if there's no payoff for the reader, then why do it?
Exactly. You're just spinning your wheels and wasting time.
Yeah, you're just putting filler on the
hardly anybody gets paid by the word anymore.
You remember Wendy's Where's the Beef?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, where's the
exactly.
beef? I mean, I don't want all, ketchup and mustard.
Right.
I want a burger, I want something that's filling.
Of course, I've run into burgers where the ketchup and the mustard were the best part of it.
Yeah, yeah. I've had those cardboard burgers before too. So, I would love it if you don't mind. Would you give us a sample reading from your?
Okay, sure.
That would be wonderful.
Let's see. I want to choose something where I wasn't mad. I didn't get mad very much, but occasionally things just got to me.
What was that? That one, the Angry Old Men, the movies.
Oh, yeah,
Jack Lemmon and
Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau.
Oh man, the Odd Couple back in the day too. That was so funny. When you said I want to say something when I wasn't angry, I was just thinking like how those guys, because you describe yourself as a curmudgeon, don't you?
I've got angry ones in here, but not that many.
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay, this one is called Fog. In Chicago, according to Carl Sandburg, the fog creeps in on little cat feet. In Savannah, it waddles in from the ocean in an alligator's crawl, and then the alligator sits and rests. Recently, I was on my way to the studio and decided to sit in one of the smaller squares. The fog had erased the sky and faded the tops of the buildings. It was close to dusk, so it was darker to begin with. From my vantage point, I could look down on one of the short blocks south of Liberty. This street is pretty typical for downtown, with a row of colonial townhouses, each with a staircase leading into a second story. The fog obscured everything above the second-story windows. A few houses were decorated with lights for the holiday. This was close to Christmas. And the bulbs glowed in the mist. It was quiet. I bet the people south of Liberty value that quiet. I had overcome most of the holiday to-do list, and those things left undone could probably remain so. Oh, there was still the dinner to prepare and some presents to wrap. Those would get done. I usually make some plans that are more gorgeous in the abstract than they turn out to be once attempted. Those things that seemed to be a good idea at planning time would remain vaporware. There was a little more baking to do and one more holiday event. But yes, things were mostly under control. But this was one of those days when the north wind had decided to go elsewhere, and so had the rain. It was a little chilly, but not bad. I felt something germinate in my mind as I sat in the square, a sense of something good. I couldn't describe it, but I sat there waiting for it to grow. When I got up, maybe a half hour later, the sense had sprouted, but I still couldn't name it. I passed a restaurant as I headed to the studio. This particular restaurant specializes in what they call plant-based dishes, and they have a magnificent torch outside that throws a flame perhaps 10 feet in the air. The torch is enclosed in some sort of transparent structure. I wondered whether this was to keep some malefactor from sneaking up and broiling a kebab when nobody is looking. Probably not. There's probably a good reason for the casing. The following day there was another touch of sunshine, and then the fog rolled in again. This time I walked along the river, accompanied by the randomly obedient dog. The dog walks are the highlight of his day, and sometimes mine. This is not a dog walk in the sense of a purposeful march. We meander. He sniffs at whatever he feels is worth the effort, and I stop so he can complete his review. He's a big fan of chewing on goldenrod leaves for whatever reason, and grounded Spanish moss seems to stimulate his bladder. Whatever, it's dog time. While he searched the trail for goldenrod, or maybe Spanish moss, I looked upriver toward the city. At that point in the river there are a few small buildings and maybe houses and a curve just after the giant storage tanks on Elba Island. The fog veiled the tops of the tanks before thinning out lower, and some of the buildings were dressed in their holiday best. The small structures had colored lights, so I decided they were residences. And there it was again, that same feeling. Some people find the holiday spirit in family and friends. Some find it in gifts. Others find it in church. I find it in holiday baking and other communal expressions. But since I'm essentially a solitary person, I find it most often in walks with the dog and exploring and photographing landscapes and skies around Savannah. My gift this year was the fog. It allowed me to look at the familiar street with the townhouses and see it for the first time, at least that way. The fog is an extra dimension to the river, and I arrived where I started as Eliot once intoned, and knew the place for the first time. And when I looked up at the Cathedral of St. John, the mist seemed to give the lights an extra glow, a nimbus maybe. Those things were always there, but the fog revealed them to me. The other gift was the leisure to see. I've taken the time to let the fog show me things unseen. I've taken more time this year to notice how nature's activity offers opportunities to view familiar landscapes differently when we walk in the morning and the sun is just over the horizon, or when the light hits the tall pines and turns them into Maxfield Parrish paintings with brilliant colors and contrasts. So that sense of good I felt while sitting in the square was about the gifts of fog and leisure, and of seeing and taking the time to see. When the holidays are over, I'll go back to my busyness just like everybody else. But the holidays give you the inclination and the time to look again at the things you take for granted the rest of the year. And that may be the greatest gift of all.
That was nice. I really like that. Really like that. Thank you. I'm gonna let you hold it because
okay. You want another one?
Yeah, a little bit later on. We've got to do the station ID and break all
absolutely.
that. Do you want to do the station ID?
I can do that. Got to move the microphone here. This is WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, and WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul.
The Savannah Philharmonic has announced a dynamic new concert series for spring 2021. Monthly indoor concerts with a masked, socially distanced audience will feature various ensembles of the Philharmonic at either the Metal Building at the Kehoe Ironworks downtown or Skidaway Island United Methodist Church locations. These concerts will culminate in the season finale outdoor concert of the full Philharmonic on June 27th at Trustees Garden. More information can be found at savannahphilharmonic.org.
What does it mean when we say that WRUU is a community radio station? It doesn't just mean that we invite the community to create programming, and it doesn't just mean that we are a voice for the community. It also means that we are counting on the community to keep us going, and you are the community. Almost all of our modest budget comes from small annual or monthly donations from listeners like you. You get to enjoy our community-focused programming because many others have stepped forward to do their part. Now do your part by joining our community of listener donors. Go to WRUU.org right now and make a one-time or monthly donation, and thank you for supporting Savannah's community radio station, 107.5 FM.
Yes, it is that time again to support WRUU through your vote in the Connect Savannah Best of Savannah poll. It's easy. Go to Connect Savannah at www.connectsavannah.com and click on the Go Vote image. Read the instructions and then scroll down and click on the image labeled Media. Type in WRUU in both the Best Local Radio Station and Best Talk Radio Station categories and click the vote button for each. Thank you for listening to and supporting WRUU in the Connect Savannah Best of Savannah poll.
This portion of WRUU Savannah Soundings programming is provided by listeners and by Brighter Day Natural Foods. Brighter Day Natural Foods has been serving Savannah's healthy food and supplement needs since 1978. It is located at the corner of Bull Street and Park Avenue. They have available online ordering and curbside delivery, and now a walk-up window for smoothies, juices, and sandwiches from the deli. They are open from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and 12 to 5:30 p.m. on Sunday. More information can be found at brighterdayfoods.com.
All right, everybody, and thank you. You are tuning in today to the Adam Messer Show here on WRU LP, Savannah, Georgia. And my special guest today is PT Bridgeport. So,
Yes.
First half hour is, I can't believe it's already, like, time's just gone by, huh? I really enjoyed your reading of that essay. What was that essay called?
Fog.
Fog. And Darlene and Terry, I told you this over the break, but Darlene and Terry Dremel, they said that they love your reading of your book, from your book.
Well, thank you very much.
Where is the book actually available?
Okay. In this area, you can find it at eShaver.
Okay.
You can find it at the gallery on Chippewa Square.
Okay.
It's an art shop. You can find it at the Irritable Pelican,
Where's that?
which is another art shop on Tybee.
Oh, on Tybee. Okay.
Yeah, you can find it at the Friendship Coffee House on Wilmington Island.
Nice.
And it's always available on Amazon.
Nice. You know, this it's so crazy because we were talking earlier. This last year or so with a pandemic and everything, it's almost like time has not stopped, but the way that we've interacted, as a group or culture or whatever, we've had to stop doing events. Like, I know I couldn't host my author events last year.
Right.
I've canceled the author events this year. Postponing on those, and having a book launch. With your book being out, how has that changed for you? Putting your book out locally, and really not being able to do author events or signings and stuff like that.
Well, it definitely has changed. But it's not like I'm selling hot dogs.
Right.
The book will be there in 6 months. The book will be there in a year.
Right.
I was never expecting this to be a bestseller.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
So all of the hype and push and runaround that goes with that just isn't there.
Yeah.
This book was written. I think that most of my sales are going to be local because this is about Savannah,
Mm-hmm.
and it's from somebody who likes being here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping that maybe people will connect by liking the same things I do, or maybe even disliking the same things
Yeah.
I do. So there's that. At the time the book came out, which is late November,
Mm-hmm.
I
Last
found
year?
last year.
Yeah.
I tried to do a little bit of pushing. I got it a few places. I'm looking forward now that things have simmered down at least a little bit. I'm looking to try to get it in more places locally. I hope I can. And the reason isn't so much to sell books,
Mm-hmm.
but the reason is to get people, even if it's 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 100,000 tourists who are interested in the city, to maybe look a little bit more into it and see what Savannah is like.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, with those expectations, I'm looking more for I'm not looking for a financial reward. So
Right.
both Lee and I are contributing proceeds from the book to WRUU. WRUU gets almost all of my author's fee, and Lee is contributing something too from the publisher's side. So we can do some good with this.
I think that's great, especially WRU's a nonprofit,
Right.
And we're all volunteers here. I mean, nobody's getting paid to to do their shows or whatever.
Yeah.
I think the only person that gets paid is when we have to contract the engineer. But yeah, that's something I think too that a lot of people, because with publishing, writing, whatever, there are a lot of different levels. Like you said, you're not trying to sell hot dogs.
Yeah.
And going back to communication and talking about relationships versus transactions and things like that, I feel like that there is this, again, going back to being sold on things or whatever, that people, the consensus is that if you don't sell 1 million books, you're not successful. I look at it the way as, when you're publishing your work and you're putting it out there, you're successful because you actually did something that most people just talk about doing.
That's quite true. And along with that, there are people who undervalue the things that they create. As you were talking, I was thinking about an artist I knew. I worked with him. We were dealing with gizmos at the time, and I would write about the gizmo, and he'd paint it with the light just so and make the gizmo look beautiful. But he did a lot of other art too, and I remember one big gorgeous painting he did of a sports figure. And as it happened, the sports figure opened a restaurant in that area.
Oh, wow.
And so after he finished the painting, which probably took pretty close to 100 hours.
Wow.
He went and he gave it to the sports figure for nothing. And the sports figure had been pretty successful, so it's not like he had to do that.
Yeah,
There are people. You have to have a pretty good idea of where you stand in your market, even if you're just getting started.
I completely agree with that, and this is one of the things that I encourage other people, because like you were talking about reading my writing in the newspaper. I didn't know that you read my articles. I had no idea. I really appreciate that, because as a columnist, I don't hear a lot of feedback from people. I have never done anything controversial.
It's almost as bad as being a radio host, isn't it?
Yeah. And, it's this thing. Like, I've never done anything controversial where somebody's like, "Oh, why did you say this?" or anything like that. I like to talk about like I like to call the stuff that I write about like popcorn. It's light and fluffy, and people enjoy it. And it's not hard news, and it's not crime, and it's not finances or politics, that kind of thing. It's about people and the events and things like that.
Right.
Which I feel like is the most important. But I also feel like artists and creators, and I like to call people art. Like, your writing is your art.
Right.
Maybe it's not painting or drawing; it's art still, because it's your creative, value of what you're doing. But folks do, they have that that imposter syndrome, right? Where they don't feel like it's like valuable, or they don't feel like it's, like, oh, well, this isn't as good. Like, I feel like I did something, but it's not as good as what you could do, or vice versa. And I always try to tell people, don't compare yourself to other people. The path that they're on is their path, and where they're at is supposed to be where they're supposed to be at.
Absolutely.
When you
and that path changes as you go, and if you get yourself into the mindset of, oh, I'm just a rookie, and stay there, you're just hurting yourself.
I agree. I mean, I love the word amateur because of the sense of being a student and being a lifelong learner. I also like the idea of being a professional because you take your craft seriously enough to want to learn something and apply it with that action.
Right.
Not just to know it and to learn it, but you take that next step of applying it and then giving back to other people.
Right. And once you go from thinking of yourself as an amateur to thinking of yourself as a professional, sometimes the values change, sometimes the objectives change.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to kind of be aware of that too.
Yeah. I mean, for example, today's interaction, like you being here in the studio with me today, right now, is an example of you taking your work seriously and me taking my work seriously.
Okay, yeah.
And the reason why I say that is because the folks, we got to do the station ID again. PT, would you do the honors again?
I will. This is WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, and WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul.
Thank you, sir.
I learned that intonation from Monty Python, incidentally.
Oh, yeah. Tis but a flesh wound, Monty Python. But no, seriously, though, so this came about because Jennifer Hyland sent me an email,
right,
saying that she would like me to do a review of your book for next month's WRUU email list and the newsletter. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to. I didn't realize that you'd publish your book, right? Even though we're on Facebook and that kind of stuff, it's just one of those things where I just didn't know. I sent an email back saying, yeah, I'd love to. And then she sent an email back, I think, to you and to Lee and me about getting an advance copy or something like that. And then I just happened to write back that, like, my guest wasn't available today. If you're able to come on today, I would love to have you.
Okay.
And it worked out where you were able to come on and wanting to. And then you came on today and we're having a conversation about life and communication and talking about your book.
You picked a good day.
Yeah, it just happened to be a great, thing. But that, I feel like that's a good example of it between an amateur and a professional. An amateur, sometimes they don't recognize an opportunity because they haven't been exposed or they haven't been around it enough. So like for me, I was like, okay, well, I have an opening. This would be a great opportunity for me to invite you to come in. It wasn't scheduled. It was just a great happenstance, just a great opportunity in my opinion. And then the same thing for you. I mean, like you've been around the block, if you want to do something or not, and vice versa with your time. Our time is so valuable. It's like, well, do I want to make that commitment to doing that? What would it be worth my investment of what I'm wanting to do to go do this, right?
Yeah, and pro tip, when you get on in life, you start to have a different sense of what your time is worth.
Right. I'm in my mid-40s and I feel that way because I feel like, okay, well, I love everybody, but I don't spend my time with people who want to waste my time or use my time.
Yeah. It goes gradually as you stick on the years.
Yeah. It's kind of like I got a friend of mine. I love him to death, but he was joking because I used to help him move a lot, and then the last couple times that they moved, they hired a company, to move the folks, and we were just joking around about it, you have those friends that you can depend on, that when you call them up, they're going to help you out.
Absolutely.
And you want to treat that. In my opinion, I feel like you want to treat that gingerly. You want to respect them and they respect you. And, like if somebody calls you up and says, hey, I need your help with this or whatever, or would you mind helping me? And vice versa. It's like, that's a gift. That gift of time to me, it's like, hey, if I call you up and you do something for me and you come do something for me because I ask you for help, man, I can't repay you enough for that. Because I can't buy your time. You know what I mean? I'm not, I could, I guess, technically, but You know what I mean? It's like if somebody gives you of their time
You
freely.
wouldn't like the hourly rate, I promise.
Well, you know, I said I could buy it. I didn't say I could afford it. So, oh, here we got another message. Let's see.
Okay.
Oh man, Darlene and Terry, you're so funny. They said that friend is you. You are the gift. Oh my gosh, you guys are making me blush. But that's one of the things I think is really cool because, you know, that happens, and wonderful things can come about it. You know, saying yes to opportunities, you know, are going to be. I feel like they've opened up a lot of different avenues for me in my life. You know, I mean, like I went from not knowing that you had your book out to sitting here talking and sitting across from you talking with you like this. You know, I feel like that's really cool.
We talked. I think it was off the air. We talked about I'm kind of a solitary person, and that means when I do take advantage of something, I get immensely rewarded because I get into areas that I never dreamed. For 4 years, I was the president of Savannah Art Association.
Oh wow!
And that provided me with so many really neat opportunities to talk with people, meet with people, interact with people who were doing things at levels so far above what I can do.
Yeah.
Just it was incredibly rewarding.
I agree. I actually, when you're saying that, I was thinking about your photography, and I have a friend named Corey Brooks. I'm sorry, I'm having like a brain cramp today. My friend Corey Brooks is a photographer, and I met him in 2011 because of an art show.
Yeah, there you go.
My friend Camilla Flynn hosted an art show called Explicit Lips. It was a spoken word poetry show. They had a live jazz band. They had a poet. They had a group of poets that came up and performed spoken word poetry. And then my friend asked me if I would create art while they were doing the show, live on stage. And I used Conte crayon, and I used like manila paper, and I made these Conte crayon. And when I say Conte crayon, y'all, it's like this French, these little sticks, and they're like really super nice pigment. Like when you think of crayons, it's not like Crayola crayons where it's a lot of wax and a little bit of pigment. This is like really nice pigment, and I did that. It feels more like chalk, really. But I created these little paintings and whatever, and I met Corey because he was there taking pictures of my friend Camilla's event. And I met a couple other people while I was there that I became friends with. And when you're talking about like meeting other people who they're and again, that's not to compare. I don't like to compare myself to other people, but to just see how other people, what their level of where they're at with their art or their creativity. You know, I always appreciate it.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you talk to somebody who's really homed in on it and can explain it, that just opens a whole new world for you.
Yeah.
On my Saturday show last night, as a matter of fact, I talked to an artist by the name of Kathy Verratti. And I knew Kathy before because she curated a show for SCAD on climate. And that was pretty interesting, but not a whole lot of Kathy was in that. Well, she's got a show at the Sentient Bean now.
Okay.
And when I saw the art, it just blew me away. And
Yeah.
so we were able to sit here and talk for a while about generalities, really, about how she goes about it. But it was tremendously interesting to me.
That I think that's one of the things that I always feel like it's so enriching too. You know, like I always feel like I take away so much more. Just you get to see this little window, you know, somebody, when you see their art or read their works or listen to their words or whatever. And I think the best art, in my opinion, is the one the piece that makes you feel or like you're connected and think about yourself and about how it applies to your life.
Oh, absolutely.
So we have got to wrap it up for this first hour, PT. And you're staying with us for the next hour, right?
If you want me here, I can be here.
Definitely. I think for the next hour, too, it'd be cool if we had another reading, if you don't mind.
Sure. Angry or unangry?
I'll let you decide that.
Okay.
So, all right. Everybody,